How does a father end up listening to his own son say that he will give him only $15 out of a fortune worth $160 million? How can a man sit in a wood-paneled room, watch his child smile at his pain, and still wait calmly for the lawyer to turn one more page? Why did the lawyer's face go white when he finally read what came next? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Aaron Blake, and I am 58 years old. Most people who meet me think I am quiet, maybe a little tired, maybe a little behind the times. They see the gray in my hair, my simple clothes, and the way I listen more than I talk. When I stand next to my wife and my son, people almost forget I am there. I am used to that feeling. I thought I had learned to live with it. That night started like many other nights when my wife had something important. It was an early birthday dinner for her at a rooftop restaurant in the center of the city. The place was one of those high places with long windows, soft light, and a view that people share online. The tables were already set when I arrived. Someone had put her name on a small sign near the entrance. The staff knew her at once, even before she walked in. I arrived first because I do not like to be late. I wore my best dark jacket and a simple white shirt. Nothing special, but clean and pressed. A young host greeted me with a polite smile, but no real interest. When I gave my name, he did not react. When I said I was there for Elena's dinner, he suddenly became more warm. He said Elena had reserved the terrace side for her guests, and he showed me to a long table near the glass. The view over the city was bright. Cars moved like slow lines of light far below. The sky was turning from blue to orange. People took pictures near the edge. I sat at the far side of the table, where I could see both the door and the view. It was my habit to choose a place where I could watch everything. When the first server came by, she asked if I wanted a drink while I waited. I said water was fine. She gave a small look like she expected something more, then wrote it down. I checked my watch. Elena was always a little late when she was getting ready for something special. Our son, Leo, was always more late than she was. I put my hands on the table and tried to relax. I told myself it would be a simple evening, a nice dinner, a few toasts, and then home. Elena arrived about 20 minutes later. I saw her in the reflection first, walking with quick, confident steps. People at nearby tables turned to look at her. She had always had that effect. She greeted the host by name, touched his arm in a friendly way, and laughed at something he said. When she reached the table, she kissed the air near my cheek and said I looked nice. Then she moved to check the place settings and the flowers. Guests began to arrive in small groups, old business partners, friends from charity boards, a few distant family members. They greeted Elena with hugs and jokes about her birthday. Most of them shook my hand in a quick, formal way. Some of them called me Steady Aaron or the man behind the books. They meant it as a friendly thing, but it always felt like they were putting me in a small box. Leo walked in almost an hour after me. He did not come alone. He walked with a small group of people around his age. They were loud and full of energy. They wore bright suits, strange shoes, and carried their phones in their hands instead of in their pockets. They had that style of people who live part of their lives on camera. Leo liked that world. He liked it more than mine. He greeted Elena with a big show of affection. He lifted her into a careful half-hug, spun her slightly, and said she did not look a day older. People around them laughed. He greeted Victor, my wife's older brother, with a strong handshake and a joke about power and family. When he came to me, he patted my shoulder as if I was an old neighbor. He said it was good to see me. He asked if I was comfortable. Then he turned away before I could answer and pulled out a chair at the other end of the table. One of his friends lifted a phone and pointed it at Leo and Elena. They leaned together and smiled while the city lights shone behind them. I saw the red recording sign on the screen. The dinner started. Plates came and went. Starters, then the main courses, then more drinks. The sound in the room grew louder. People talked about markets, new projects, new buildings. They talked about Leo's latest idea for a company. They said he had a sharp mind for modern things. They talked about Elena's reputation in the city and all the deals she had done. Sometimes my name came up as the person who kept track of details. People would say I was good with numbers and that I kept everything safe. I did not mind that part. It was true that I spent most of my time with ledgers and reports. I was the one who checked contracts and followed up with bankers. I knew the numbers better than anyone. I knew where the money came from and where it went. I knew how many foundations we had and how many properties. I knew which parts of the fortune were risky and which were quiet and steady. That was my world. But my world did not impress people at that table. Leo raised his glass and called for attention. He said he wanted to say a few words for his mother. The room became quiet, except for a few soft sounds from the kitchen. Leo stood, holding his glass with one hand and his phone with the other, because someone was filming him from across the table. He loved to be seen. He was good at it. He spoke about Elena's strength. He said she was a creator, an example, a leader. He said he grew up watching her turn ideas into buildings and paper into wealth. He talked about how she had taught him to think big and to stand tall. He did not mention me at all. It was as if he had grown up alone beside her, with no one else in the room. Some people looked at me for a second, then looked away again. I sat still. My hands rested on the table. My face stayed calm. Inside, something quiet pulled back a little, the way you step back from a hot stove. Then Leo moved from talking about his mother to talking about the future. He said the family name would continue, that new projects would come, that the fortune would not sleep. He said he was ready for more responsibility, ready to carry the torch, as he put it. Victor nodded, pleased. A few guests clapped softly. One of Leo's friends joked that he was already the new leader. Another asked in a loud voice what Leo would do with all that money when the time came. There was a pause, the kind of pause you hear before a punchline. Leo smiled and looked down the table at me. His eyes were bright. He had had enough to drink to feel brave. He said that when the time came, he would take care of everyone. He said Elena could relax, knowing that he would manage everything. Then he looked straight at me, in front of everyone, and said he would give me $15. He said it in a playful tone, as if it was a joke. He said $15 was enough for a coffee, and that I was simple and did not need more. People laughed. Some laughed with surprise, some with real enjoyment, and some with discomfort. A few guests looked at me quickly and then away again. A server near the wall froze for a second, then continued to pour water. Victor added that it was good that Leo had a sense of humor. He said I had done well as a careful man in the background, but times were changing. He said big games needed big players. Someone at the other end of the table murmured that older people should enjoy quiet days and let the next generation play with the big toys. The words floated over the table like light smoke. Elena did not defend me. She smiled in that tight way she used when she did not like a moment but did not want to spoil the mood. She put a hand on Leo's arm and told him to be kind, but her voice was soft and lost in the noise. Leo said he was only playing. He lifted his glass toward me and said that I was the calm center of the family, that he admired my simplicity. The words sounded almost polite, but the eyes and the laughter around them turned them into something else. I felt the heat in my face, but I kept it under control. I did not stand up. I did not call anyone out. I did not leave the table. I took a drink of water. I looked at my plate. I listened to the buzz of voices start again, as if nothing important had happened. Inside, though, I noticed something. It was a small, clear feeling, like a cold stone in the center of my chest. It did not feel like anger. It felt like a sign that something had crossed a line. The joke was not new. I had heard versions of it before, in private, inside comments. But this time was different. This time it was in front of everyone, with a camera running, with my wife at the center of the table and my son using me as material. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Plates came and went. There were more jokes, more small speeches. Someone made a toast to family unity. Another talked about legacy. People asked Leo about his new project and his new investors. They asked him how it felt to be the future of the family. He answered with comfort and pride. No one asked me anything about the future. When dessert arrived, I told Elena quietly that I needed some air. She nodded without really looking at me. She was busy listening to Victor talk about a new building. I stood up slowly, careful not to bump any chairs, and walked toward the exit. I moved through the room like a ghost, unnoticed by most people. The host gave me a small nod as I passed. In the elevator, I watched my reflection in the metal doors. I looked calm. I always looked calm. I did not feel calm, but the feeling was not wild. It was focused in a narrow place in my chest, where that cold stone rested. My hands did not shake. My breathing was steady. I stepped out into the underground parking garage. The air was cooler and smelled of concrete and oil. The sound of the restaurant was gone. Only a few cars were there, lined up in their spaces, shining under the pale lights. My steps echoed slightly as I walked toward our car. I leaned on the side of the car and closed my eyes for a moment. Up above, my family was laughing. Down here, there was only the hum of distant traffic and the soft buzz of the lights. I thought about Leo's words. I thought about $15. I thought about the years I had spent building and checking and protecting, always in the background, always out of the picture. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message from Elena asking where I had gone. Instead, I saw a short message from a name I had not seen on my screen for some time. It was from Mira, the estate lawyer who had helped Elena and me many years ago. The message was simple. She reminded me that I was still listed as primary trustee on the old family trust and wrote that we could talk any time I wished. I read the message twice, standing there in the cold light of the garage. Then I put the phone back in my pocket and stayed very still, listening to my own steady breathing in the quiet space. When I went back upstairs that night, the dinner was already moving to dessert. Elena asked if I felt better. I said that I just needed some air. I did not mention Mira's message. I watched Leo talk and laugh, and I watched how people looked at him. They saw him as the future. They saw me as the past. On the way home in the car, Elena talked about the gifts people had brought and the speeches they had made. She did not mention the moment with the $15. I did not mention it either. The silence between us felt thick, but we both stepped around it. Later, when the house was quiet, I went to my small office at the end of the hallway. The room was not impressive. It had a plain desk, 2 shelves, and a filing cabinet that I had moved from place to place for many years. The carpet was a little old. The chair was comfortable but worn. This room was mine in a way that none of the big rooms downstairs felt like mine. On the wall, there was a framed copy of my engineering degree, a simple certificate from a state university with my name in formal letters. Next to it, there was a small frame photo of Elena and me in our first apartment. I sat at the desk and looked at that old photo. In it, we stood in front of a narrow window with cheap curtains. Elena wore a simple dress and had her hair tied back. I wore a shirt that I now would only use for painting. The room around us had boxes on the floor and a single lamp leaning at a bad angle. We were both smiling in a way we rarely smiled now, wide and open, like anything was possible. Back then, the money we had could fit in one folder. Back then, no one asked who was the real owner. We both knew we were building something together. I remembered the way it started. I had studied engineering, but I was better with systems than with machines. I liked to see how things moved, how data flowed, how supplies and people connected. I worked for a small logistics company after college. They had old software that broke down often. I began to fix small things, then bigger things. After a while, I built a simple program on my own time to track deliveries and orders. It was not pretty, but it worked. I showed it to my boss. He said it looked boring. Then he noticed that orders were suddenly going out on time and that costs went down. He forgot my name, but he liked the results. Elena came into my life around that time. She did not come from wealth, but her family had started to grow in real estate just as the city began to change. Her older brother Victor was already moving in those circles. Elena was the one who met people, kept track of faces, and listened for new chances. We met at a joint meeting between my company and one of her early projects. While other people talked about surface things, she asked me specific questions about delays, routes, and why the trucks were often half empty. I remember being surprised that someone noticed those details. We started to talk more often. After some time, we moved into that small apartment together. I left my job and started my own company in a tiny rented room. I used an old computer and a borrowed printer. I built a simple version of a logistics platform, one that could serve many small clients, not just one company. Elena and Victor invested a little money. It was all very fragile. I worked long hours. Elena worked long hours too, visiting sites and speaking with investors. We believed that if we held on, something strong would grow from this. It did. Over the next years, my software became the quiet base of many projects. It tracked materials, tenants, and service calls. It made big plans possible. Elena's name went on new buildings and development deals. She became known as someone who could turn empty land into something useful. Victor sat on boards and negotiated with banks. And me? I sat in rooms with servers and spreadsheets. I adjusted small things that no one saw but everyone used. I did not mind. I liked the feeling that the system worked because I understood it deeply. When Leo was born, we still lived in a modest house. I remember carrying him around late at night while Elena checked early drafts of contracts at the kitchen table. We felt tired but proud. As he grew, the business grew with him. The first large building with our family name on it opened when Leo was 5. A newspaper took a photo of Elena and Victor cutting a ribbon while I stood a step behind, holding Leo's hand. In the paper, the caption named Elena and Victor. It did not name me. That was the first time I noticed how easy it was for people to erase a quiet person. As the years passed, the gap grew. We moved into a larger house. There were more meetings, more travel, more numbers. At some point, people started to call the structure around us a family office. That sounded formal and important. I became the one who checked every contract before it was signed. I sat with tax advisors. I spoke with bankers in small rooms. I made sure every new company and every foundation had clear links to the main holding. Elena said she trusted me more than anyone with the details. She said that in private. In public, people liked the image of her as the sole creator. Victor liked that image too. Leo was a bright child. He liked charts and maps, but he liked attention more. When he was a teenager, he began to see the difference between his parents. He watched how people reacted to Elena in public and to me in the same spaces. He saw how cameras turned toward her and away from me. I tried to teach him about networks and risk, about how to read a balance sheet, about why we spread assets between trusts and companies. He listened at first. Then he began to say that all of that was old style, that his generation worked differently. One memory from the country club stayed sharp in my mind. It was a few years before the rooftop dinner. We were on the terrace that looked over a perfect green field. People walked by in tidy clothes, carrying sports bags, talking about markets and travel. The sun was bright. Elena had gone inside to take a call. Victor was talking with someone near the bar. I sat with Leo at a small table. He was in his mid-20s then, full of plans for startups and online platforms. He spoke fast. He used words I did not know. He began to talk about the future of the family money. He said that once his mother was no longer the main figure, people would look to him. He said this with ease, as if it were a simple fact. I asked him what he thought my place would be in that future. I did not ask to challenge him. I asked because I truly wanted to know how he saw it. He said that I could relax, that I had done my part, and that he would manage everything. He said he would make sure I had a comfortable allowance and did not have to worry. He did not say this with hate. He said it with the relaxed kindness people show to someone they think is already finished with real work. He said that he believed I was best when I did not have to think about big decisions, that I could enjoy the garden and simple hobbies. He added that he was built for pressure, and that he had the mind for large deals in a way I never had. He smiled when he said it. He did not see how the words cut. I remember watching his face and feeling a mix of sadness and wonder. Somewhere along the way, he had taken in Victor's view of me. In that view, I was not a founder or a builder. I was a caretaker, a safe pair of hands who kept the machine oiled until the real operators arrived. I realized then that he did not see the system I had constructed. He only saw the image that stood on top of it. That evening, when I went back to my office after the rooftop dinner, I turned on the old computer at my desk and searched my email. Somewhere in the thousands of messages, I remembered a specific exchange with Mira. It had been years ago, when we were first asked to move part of the business into a long-term trust. At that time, Leo was still in school. Elena had wanted to be sure that he would be secure if anything happened to us. We met with Mira in a small office then, much plainer than the one she had now. Mira had asked careful questions. She wanted to know what kind of protection we wanted, not just for money, but for relationships. She had seen many families fall apart when the next generation took over. She had suggested a clause that would allow the trustee to slow or change how an heir received funds if that heir treated the founders with clear disrespect or tried to remove them from their own home or role. At the time, the idea had felt distant. We had agreed that it was wise, but we did not think we would ever need it. We signed the papers, and then life moved on. I found that old email now. It was short and direct. Mira summarized the conduct and relationship clause in simple words. She wrote that it could protect us if our own child ever tried to erase us from our own estate. She wrote that it was a safety net, not a weapon, and that any use of it would require clear proof and careful steps. I had read it once many years ago, and then put it out of my mind. Seeing it now, after the $15 joke, felt different. It felt like a small light turning on in a dark corner of my memory. I printed the message and the summary document that was attached to it. The printer in my office was old, and it made a slow grinding sound as each page came out. I placed the pages on the desk and read them with new eyes. The tone was calm and technical, but the meaning was simple. The structure of our fortune was not as loose as Leo thought. It had bones, and some of those bones were still under my hands. I took a small USB drive from the drawer. It was the same one I used when I backed up important files. I plugged it in and created a folder with a plain name. Then I saved the email and the attached summary document into that folder. I did not yet know what I would do with them. I only knew that I did not want to lose them again in the flood of everything else. When I finished, I turned off the screen and sat in the quiet room. Down the hall, I could hear the distant sound of the television from the living room, where Leo was talking loudly about new plans, and Elena was listening with a tired smile. I looked again at the photo of our first apartment and at my degree on the wall. In my mind, I walked back through the years. From that narrow room to this large house. From simple ledgers to thick trust papers. For many years, I had told myself that I did not need public credit as long as the work was sound and the family was secure. But now, my own son thought my whole life's work was worth less than a small bill. He thought the foundation I had built was a toy he could use as he liked. In that quiet office, with the printed pages in front of me and the small drive on the desk, I began to see that maybe I had been wrong to stay so far in the background for so long. The weeks after Elena's birthday dinner passed in a strange mix of normal days and hidden tension. On the surface, life went on the same way. Meetings, emails, family dinners. Leo came and went, full of energy and plans. Victor visited often, sometimes dropping by with documents for Elena to sign, sometimes just to drink coffee and talk about projects. From the outside, our house looked like a comfortable place where everything was in order. Inside, something had shifted in me. I started to look at small moments with different eyes. When Leo came into the kitchen in the morning and spoke to Elena about new business ideas, he barely looked in my direction. He gave me short greetings. Sometimes he would pat my shoulder, as if I were a friendly neighbor or an older driver. When he spoke about the future of the company, he spoke as if he already held the wheel and I was sitting in the back seat. One afternoon, I heard him speaking loudly on the phone in the living room. I was in the hall, out of sight. He told someone that once his mother stepped back, he would move our structures into a new shape that fit modern times. He said that he needed freedom, that the current system was too careful, too slow. He said that old hands had done a good job, but that the next chapter would be written by him. He did not say my name, but it was clear who he meant. I spent more evenings in my office. I did not take any action yet. I only read. I opened old folders and reviewed balance sheets, company charts, and trust summaries. I reminded myself where everything stood. I noticed how often my own signature appeared on the early documents, together with Elena's. I noticed that the role of trustee was not just a formality. It carried weight I had never fully used. I also read through Mira's old messages. Over the years, I had asked her many questions. She had answered in clear language, even when the topics were complex. She had warned us from the beginning that once money grew beyond a certain point, people would start to see each other as roles instead of as family. She had suggested legal tools to protect relationships. At the time, those tools had felt like extra layers we added just in case. Now they felt like the main structure under the paint. Then Elena's health changed suddenly. It happened on a weekday afternoon. She had gone to a meeting in town. I was at home, working through a report. A call came from one of her assistants. The woman sounded tense. She said that Elena had felt weak during the meeting, that she had trouble standing, that an ambulance had been called. She said that they were on their way to the hospital and that I should meet them there. I felt a strange, cold clarity as I took my keys and left the house. The drive to the hospital felt longer than usual, even though I knew the way well. I parked in the visitor's lot and walked quickly through the sliding doors. Inside, the light was harsh. The smell of disinfectant hung in the air. At the front desk, I gave Elena's name. The staff member checked a screen, then told me that she was in an examination room. I waited on a hard chair in a busy corridor. People moved in and out of rooms. Nurses walked past with charts. Overhead, a soft voice called for doctors to report to different areas. I felt like a quiet stone in a fast river. Leo arrived a short time later, moving quickly, his phone in his hand. Victor walked behind him, breathing hard, his face tight. Leo asked if I had any updates. I said that I did not. He sighed and said that this was the last thing they needed right now, with so many deals in motion. Victor muttered that stress and age always came at the wrong time. Neither of them asked how I was. A doctor came to speak to us. He explained that Elena had experienced a sudden problem that required close observation. He used careful words and said that they were running tests, that she was stable for the moment but needed rest and monitoring. He said only family could visit, and only for short periods. Leo said that we were her immediate family. Victor added that he was on the board of the main holding and needed to be informed. The doctor listened, then nodded and led us to a room. Elena lay in a bed, pale and tired, with wires and screens around her. Her eyes were open, but she looked exhausted. She tried to make a light comment when she saw us, something about causing trouble. Her voice sounded thin. I went to her side and took her hand. She squeezed my fingers weakly. Leo stood at the end of the bed and told her that she needed to rest, that the team would handle everything. Victor stood on the other side, already thinking of who to call. A nurse came in and asked us to keep our visit short. After a few minutes, she led Leo and me into a small family room down the hall. Victor joined us with a folder in his hand. He had not had that folder when we arrived. I guessed that he had brought it from his car or had asked someone to bring it from his office. Victor said that he did not want to waste time. He reminded us that Elena was the key signatory on many documents, that many things flowed through her. He said that if her health stayed fragile, there could be delays and confusion. He said that was not fair to her, not fair to the projects, and not fair to Leo's future. He spoke in a smooth tone, like someone who had given this speech in his head many times. He opened the folder and spread out several documents on the small table in the room. He said that these were updated papers that would place Leo in a stronger position at once, so that he could sign and decide without needing Elena to be present. He said that this would lighten the load on her and prevent any gaps. He said that, as the spouse, I would of course be respected and taken care of, but that I should not have to carry formal duties. I looked at the papers. They were full of dense lines and stamps, but I knew how to read them. On one page, I saw that the trustee role for the main trust would shift from me and Elena together to Leo alone, with Victor as backup. On another page, I saw that power over certain companies would pass directly to Leo for operational efficiency. There were lines about my own position, too, but the language was vague. It spoke of comfort, support, and respect, but not of decisions or control. Leo said that he agreed with Victor that this was the logical next step. He said that I had worked hard all my life and deserved peace without heavy tasks. He said that he did not want to see me tired in bank offices. He framed it as a kindness. He said that once Elena felt better, she would also see how practical this was. Then Elena herself was wheeled past the open door toward another test, pale and turned slightly away from us. She did not see the papers on the table. She did not hear the words shift of control or for operational efficiency. She only saw her family standing together. She gave a small wave as she passed by. Victor pushed a pen toward me. He said that this was a good moment to sign, while everyone was focused and together. He said that lawyers could be brought in later to adjust details, but that the core structure should be set now. Leo stood beside him, arms folded, eyes on me, waiting. For a brief moment, I felt the old instinct rise in me, the one that always told me to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to trust that others meant well. I thought about Elena lying in the bed. I thought about long nights when we had counted every small bill. I thought about how proud she had been when we signed the first trust papers with Mira many years ago. I thought about how Leo had looked at me at the rooftop dinner with that bright and careless smile. Then the cold stone in my chest grew heavier and clearer. I realized that if I signed those papers now, I would be signing away not just control, but also the last clear link between my work and the future of this family. I would be telling my son that he was right to see me as a figure he could move aside with a polite gesture and a small gift. I placed my hand on the pen, then let it go. I told Victor that I would not sign anything in a hospital room. I said that Elena and I had set up strong structures with legal help and that any changes would go through the same careful path. I said that I respected Leo's energy but that I would not step aside in a rush. Victor's mouth tightened. He said that I was being emotional, that I was letting fear guide me when logic should guide me. He said that lawyers would only slow things down and add cost. Leo said that he understood that I was stressed but that I needed to think about the big picture. He said that I had always been careful with numbers and should see that this made sense. I repeated that I would not sign. I kept my voice steady. I did not raise it. I did not argue about motives. I only stated a boundary. I said that if they wanted changes, they could bring them to Mira or another independent lawyer, and we would review them in a proper office, not in a hospital where Elena lay in a bed. Leo looked frustrated. Victor looked angry. For the first time in many years, I did not step back when I saw those expressions. I simply stood up and said that I needed some air. I walked out into the corridor and left them in the small room with their folder. Later, when visiting hours ended, I walked to the parking garage under the hospital. The air there was cool and still. Cars were lined up in quiet rows, some with small lights on inside. My footsteps echoed again, like they had in the garage under the restaurant. My head felt clearer now than it had then. I sat down in the driver's seat of my car, but did not start the engine. The events of the day ran through my mind. Elena's pale face, the pen on the table, the words about lightening my load, the documents sliding toward me. I felt the weight of many years of habit, of always saying yes, of always being the one who made things smoother for others. Then I took out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Mira's name. I thought about the message she had sent after the rooftop dinner. I thought about the old trust file she had once helped us build. I pressed the call button. When she answered, her voice was calm and professional, the same as always. I told her about Elena's health incident. I told her about the papers Victor had brought. I told her my answer in that hospital room. I did not raise my voice. I did not complain. I only described what had happened and the language I had seen on those pages. She listened without interrupting. Then she said that I had done the right thing by not signing anything in that setting. She said that she still had copies of our original trust documents and that we should meet soon to review them. She reminded me again that I was listed as a trustee with specific powers, not as a guest. Her words did not flatter me. They were simple statements of fact. That was exactly what I needed. We agreed on a time to meet in her office. After I ended the call, I sat for a few more minutes in the quiet car, my hands resting on the steering wheel. Outside, a few people walked through the garage, their steps echoing on the concrete. For the first time in a long while, I did not feel like a shadow in my own story. I felt like someone who had stepped into a place he should have occupied all along. The next days moved in a slow, heavy way. Elena stayed in the hospital for tests and observation. I visited her every day. Sometimes Leo was there, sometimes Victor, sometimes both. They kept bringing up ideas for new structures and temporary changes. I answered in the same way each time. I said that we would discuss any changes with our lawyer in the right place. They did not like that answer, but they had no direct way to force me. When the day for my meeting with Mira came, I woke early. The sky was still dim when I left the house. The streets were quiet. I drove across the city toward the older business district. The buildings there were not as tall as the new glass towers, but they looked solid. They were made of stone and brick, with names carved into their walls. Mira's office was in one of those buildings, on a middle floor. In the reception area, a young assistant greeted me and offered tea. The chairs were simple but comfortable. There were shelves with law books and a few plants by the windows. The place did not try to impress. It felt calm and careful, like the person who worked there. Mira came out to meet me. She looked almost the same as when we had first met her years ago, only with a few more lines at the corners of her eyes. She greeted me warmly, but not loudly. She led me into her office, a room lined with folders and neat stacks of paper. On the table near her desk, there was already a thick file with our family name on it. She asked first about Elena's health, not about the money. I told her what the doctors had said so far. I did not use strong words. I only said that Elena was weak and tired and that the future was unclear. Mira listened and nodded. Then she moved to the file and opened it. She showed me the original trust documents. The paper had slightly yellow edges from time, but the ink was still dark. She explained, as she had once explained long ago, how the main holdings were placed into a long-term trust. She reminded me that Elena and I had both been founders and co-trustees. Then she pointed to the part that named the successor trustee in case one of us could not continue. She told me that, according to those terms, if Elena could not act, I became the sole trustee of the main trust. Not Leo, not Victor, me. She said this in a neutral tone, as if she were reading the weather. The words still surprised me a little. I had known this before, but I had never let the meaning sink in. At the time of signing, I had focused on providing security for our son. I had not thought about control. Then she turned to the section about the conduct and relationship clause. She read it slowly and translated the legal language into simple words. It said that the trustee could adjust or delay an heir's access to funds if there was clear, repeated behavior that showed open disrespect or attempts to push the founders out of their own home or role while they were still present. It required proof. It required written steps. It did not allow someone to act out of sudden anger. It was careful. She looked at me and asked if I had kept any record of recent behavior that might connect to this. I thought about the rooftop dinner, the $15 remark, the way Leo had spoken in front of guests. I told her that people had recorded the moment on their phones and had shared it online. I said that I had also heard Leo speak about me as if I were a small problem to move aside. I mentioned the papers in the hospital and the way Victor had tried to rush me into signing them. Mira asked if I could gather anything that showed these things clearly. Videos, messages, emails. I said that I could try. She told me that I should not change my behavior on the surface. She advised me to remain calm, to refuse to sign anything, and to continue visiting Elena and attending meetings as usual. Meanwhile, she would review the trust in detail and prepare notes for possible action. She said that I did not have to decide anything that day. Her words felt like a steady hand on my shoulder. After I left her office, I went straight to the bank. It was a tall glass building with a bright lobby. Inside, a senior banker led me to a private client room. The room had a heavy door, thick walls, and no windows to the street. It felt like a small safe made for people instead of paper. On the table, there were already several folders. The banker brought up our accounts on a screen and walked me through the structure. He showed me how most of the major assets, buildings, company shares, certain holdings, were not in our personal names, but in the trust. He reminded me that changes to those assets had to go through the trustee. He pointed out that while Leo was named as a future beneficiary, he was not named as a trustee. He also confirmed that no recent changes had been made to those roles. I asked him about liquidity, about what parts of the money could move quickly and what parts were locked in long plans. He explained that a portion of the wealth sat in long-term investments with fixed rules, another part was in companies, and a smaller part was in flexible accounts. All of it, he said, fell under the framework of the trust and its terms. He looked at me with quiet respect when he said that I had more formal authority than many people realized. When I left the bank, I carried printed summaries in a sealed envelope. It felt heavier than its real weight. In my hands, I held proof that the story inside our home, the one where Leo was already the leader and I was only an old helper, did not match the structure on paper. On paper, I was still standing at the center, even if no one else wanted to see it. My next stop was the old family office in the holding company building. That office had moved twice over the years. The current one was on a floor with fewer windows and more storage. The archive room sat at the back, behind a plain door with a simple label. Inside, there were shelves of boxes and a few old computers on metal tables. The air smelled like paper and dust. I had asked the internal staff for access in advance, and they had prepared the main boxes. I started with board minutes from past years. I flipped through the pages, scanning for my name, for Leo's, for any note about changing structures. I saw many lines where people thanked me for the clarity of reports. I saw notes about how the system I had built kept things stable during rough markets. I also saw, in more recent years, lines about shifting some presentations and decisions toward Leo to build his public profile. Then I moved to old emails stored on an internal server. An IT worker helped me log in and search by keywords. I found messages where Leo spoke to Victor and others about the image problem of having me present in certain meetings. In one message, he wrote that he loved me but felt that I did not fit the strong picture he wanted to show to partners. In another, he wrote that once things were in his hands, he would move me into a quiet corner with a small budget and a big thank you card. The words were not meant for me, but now I read them on the screen. I asked for copies of those messages and of the board minutes that showed my early work and the later shift toward Leo. The staff printed them and also saved them to a secure drive that I had brought. I also saved a copy of the video from the rooftop dinner. One of Leo's friends had posted it in a short clip online, edited with music and text, but the original file was still on the office server because they had sent it around for publicity. In the clip, you could hear Leo clearly speak about giving me $15 while people laughed around him. My face appeared in one corner of the frame, quiet and still. By the time I left the building, the sky was already moving toward evening. The light was softer, and the air had a slight chill. I stopped at a small cafe near the financial district. It was a quiet place with wooden tables and a few students working on laptops. I chose a table by the wall and set down my briefcase. My hands were a little tired from carrying the papers. I called Mira and told her that I had collected some material. She said that she was near the area and could join me. A short time later, she arrived, still in her work clothes, with a notebook under her arm. She ordered tea and sat across from me. I handed her the envelope from the bank, the printed emails, the board minutes, and a small drive with the digital files. She reviewed a few items while we sat there. She did not need to read everything to understand the pattern. She saw enough to confirm what she had guessed. She said that the structure on paper gave me strong tools and that the behavior in those messages and that video could be seen as clear disrespect under the trust terms. She did not promise any particular outcome. She reminded me that every step had to be documented and measured, but she said that I was not imagining things. The gap between how my family acted and how the law saw my position was real. We spoke in low voices, not because we planned anything secret, but because that was our nature. I told her about my fear of harming my own son. I said that even after everything, part of me still wanted to protect him. She replied that protecting him did not have to mean giving him everything at once. She said that sometimes the most careful thing a parent could do was to set a firm boundary and let the child feel the shape of it. She suggested that we prepare for several paths. One path involved keeping things as they were, but warning Leo clearly, through formal letters, that his behavior had consequences. Another path involved adjusting the trust so that more money flowed into long-term projects and charities, with stricter limits on personal access. A third path involved delaying his direct control for some years, giving him time to grow up. I listened and asked questions. For the first time, I did not feel like a guest in such a conversation. I felt like a person with the right to sit at that table. When Mira spoke of the trustee, she was speaking about me, not as a symbol, but as a person with a clear role. By the time we parted, the cafe was almost empty. Outside, the streetlights had come on. I walked back to my car with a small folder in my hand. Inside were Mira's first notes and a list of documents she would prepare in the coming days. None of them changed anything yet, but they outlined what could be done if I chose to act. I drove home through the dark streets, past buildings that my work had helped make possible. In the past, I had always looked at those buildings as proof of what Elena and Victor had achieved. That evening, I saw them differently. I remembered the nights I had spent checking contracts line by line, the spreadsheets I had built, the systems I had designed so that rents and payments moved smoothly. I realized that my quiet work had shaped this city more than anyone on the outside would ever know. At home, Leo was in the living room with a few friends. They were watching a screen and laughing about something. I walked past them and greeted them. Leo asked in a casual tone if I had spent another day in the world of forms. He said that someone had to like that slow world so that others could enjoy the faster one. His friends laughed politely. I told him that I had spoken with Mira about some updates after Elena's health change. I said that we would review the structures carefully. He shrugged and said that I should let the experts handle it and not stress myself. In his mind, I was not the expert. He still thought I was just an old helper passing papers back and forth. I went to my office, closed the door, and placed Mira's notes in the top drawer of my desk. Then I sat down and looked again at the photo of our first apartment. I thought about the long road from that tiny room to this house, from my first small program to a system that held many lives. I understood, finally and fully, that if I did nothing now, I would be the one telling the world that my own life's work was worth only $15, and I knew I was not willing to do that. Elena's condition did not improve. For a while, there were small ups and downs. One day she seemed stronger, the next day very weak again. The doctors used long terms and spoke in careful ways. In simple words, they said that her body was tired and that there might not be much more they could do. I visited her every day. Sometimes she was awake enough to talk. Sometimes she only held my hand. On one quiet afternoon, I sat beside her bed and told her about the city outside. I told her that some of our buildings now had lights in every window at night. I told her that tenants wrote letters about how much they liked their homes. She smiled a little. She said that we had done some good work. She also told me that she was worried about Leo, not because of money, but because of how he saw the world. She said that he loved the idea of power too much. She said that she hoped he would remember where he came from. Her voice faded as she spoke. Not long after that, one early morning, a call came from the hospital. The staff member on the line spoke in a soft tone. She said that Elena's body had finally stopped fighting. She said that it had been peaceful. After that call, nothing felt real for a while. I moved through the next days as if I were walking through water. There was a service at a quiet hall with flowers and speeches. People spoke at length about Elena's strong presence, her deals, her public image. They mentioned me in passing. They spoke more about Leo as the promising next step. I did not argue with their words. They were only saying what they had seen from the outside. They could not see the long nights at the kitchen table, the early trust meetings, the slow work with spreadsheets and code. Those memories lived in me and in a few old photos. They were not part of the public story, and now the person who shared them with me was gone. After the service, the house felt larger and emptier. Rooms that had been full of movement now stayed silent. People called. Some visited. They brought food and flowers. They told Leo that he now had big shoes to fill. Victor stayed close to him, speaking in low voices about projects, as if the world would stop if they did not keep every plan moving. I kept my routine. I visited my mother, Janine, in her small house at the edge of the city. She was in her 80s, but her mind was still sharp. Her house was simple, with old furniture and shelves full of books. When I walked in, she hugged me with thin arms and looked at my face for a long time. She did not talk much about Elena. She had already done that with me on earlier visits. She asked me how Leo was handling things. I told her that he was already busy with meetings and what he called future plans. I told her about the rooftop dinner, about the $15 remark, and about the papers in the hospital. I had not told her these things before. As I spoke, she listened very carefully. When I finished, she said that she was sad but not surprised. She said that people who grow up with large resources often lose the sense of what built them. Then she looked at me and asked a simple thing. She asked if I remembered what kind of man I had wanted to be when I was young. Not what I wanted to do for work, but what kind of man. I thought for a moment and told her that I had always wanted to be someone who did the right thing quietly, someone who took care of his family, someone who stayed steady. She nodded. She said that I had done that for a long time, maybe too long. She said that taking care of my family now might look different than it did in the past. A few days later, I met with Mira again in her office. This time, the meeting was more formal. She had prepared several documents. There were notes about the trust, letters to be sent, and forms that required my signature. She reviewed each one with me in clear language. The first group of documents related to my role as trustee. One paper was a formal notice that Elena's role as co-trustee had ended due to her absence. It recognized me as the sole trustee of the main trust. Another paper stated that I had reviewed the conduct and relationship clause and that I had reason to consider its use in relation to Leo. This paper did not yet apply the full effect. It simply recorded that I was opening a file on this issue and gathering proof. The second group of documents outlined options for the structure of the trust going forward. Mira explained that I could choose to keep Leo's full future share as it was, I could delay his direct control, or I could change the flow of certain assets into longer-term projects. She had drafted a path that moved more money toward foundations, housing funds, and scholarships, while placing stronger limits on direct personal use. This path still gave Leo a comfortable yearly amount, more than most people would ever see, but it removed his dream of immediate, total control. The third group related to my own will. Mira suggested that I review it in light of Elena's absence. She had prepared a version in which my personal savings and pension would go first to my mother and to a scholarship fund in our family name, instead of directly to Leo. She said that this did not cut Leo out forever. It simply meant that any personal wealth I had control over would follow the same values as the trust. I read each document slowly. Mira did not rush me. She answered my questions, explained terms, and reminded me that nothing forced me to sign that day. But I could feel that standing still was also a choice. If I did nothing, the story that Leo believed would slowly become reality. People would treat him as the natural owner of everything, and my place would shrink further until even I believed that my work had been a small side note. I thought again about my mother's question. I thought about the man I had wanted to be. I knew that signing these papers would hurt Leo in the short term. He would feel that I had taken something from him. But I also knew that letting him walk over me and over the structures Elena and I had built would hurt him in a different, deeper way. It would teach him that loud confidence can erase years of quiet work, and that he could treat people who loved him as props. In the end, I took the pen and signed. My hand did not shake. I signed the trustee notice, the instructions to adjust parts of the trust, and the new version of my own will. With each signature, I felt as if I were placing a small weight on the side of a balance that had been too light for a long time. When we finished, Mira gathered the papers and said that her firm would file the appropriate notices with the bank and other institutions. She also said that, at some point, there would need to be a formal reading for the family, where Elena's personal wishes and the trust structure would be presented together. That formal reading was scheduled a few weeks later at Mira's firm. An assistant sent out messages with the date and time. Leo received one, Victor received one, and so did a few other close relatives. The message did not explain the details. It simply stated that the estate of Elena and the related trust arrangements would be discussed and that all main parties should attend. During those weeks, Leo's behavior followed a clear pattern. He threw himself into visible projects. He met with young investors, posted photos with captions about legacy and vision, and allowed himself to be seen as the new face of the family. In private moments, he spoke with me about how busy he was and how much responsibility he expected soon. He said that he was already making lists of changes he would make once everything was officially in his hands. He talked about selling certain buildings he considered boring and moving funds into more exciting ventures. He mentioned outsourcing some of the slow internal work, including the office where I had spent so many years. He said that he did not want to be held back by old habits. He said that he would make sure I had a suite in one of the buildings where I could live comfortably and not worry about work. He thought he was being generous. I listened with a calm face. I did not tell him about the documents I had signed. I did not tell him that the trust would not bend in the way he imagined. When he spoke about giving me a small monthly amount, I only reminded him that the structures were more complex than he thought, and that we would understand more after the meeting at Mira's office. He waved this away and said that lawyers loved to make simple things seem complex so they could send bigger bills. The night before the meeting, I sat in the living room alone. The house felt different without Elena's presence, but her taste was still in every object. On the shelf, there were framed photos of Leo at different ages. In most of them, he stood by Elena's side at public events. In a few, he sat with me at a table full of papers, his small hand on a calculator. Those were my favorites. They reminded me of a time when he still saw the value in quiet work. I took one of those small photos and carried it to my office. I placed it next to the old picture of our first apartment. For a long moment, I just sat and looked at them together. They told the whole story, where we started, what we built, and who we thought we were raising. I knew that the next day would not fix everything between Leo and me. It might even break some things. But I also knew that I could not keep playing the role he had assigned to me. On the morning of the meeting, I dressed in a dark suit that fit well but did not draw attention. I ate a simple breakfast and drove across the city. My hands on the steering wheel were steady. My thoughts were clear. I was not going to fight with anyone. I was going to let the structures speak. When I reached the building where Mira's firm worked, I parked in the underground lot and walked into the lobby. The floor was made of stone. The walls were covered with quiet art. An assistant at the desk greeted me politely and told me that the others were already arriving. I could hear the low sound of familiar voices from down the hall, mixed with small bursts of laughter. I walked toward that sound, feeling each step as if I were walking toward the true center of my own life for the first time. The assistant led us into the conference room. The table was long and dark, with chairs on both sides. There were jugs of water, glasses, and a small recording device near the center. Mira sat at one end with a senior partner from her firm. Files were stacked in front of them, neat and closed. Leo took a seat near the middle, with Victor beside him. A few cousins sat farther down, quiet and curious. I chose a chair opposite Leo, not at the head, not at the far end, just a simple place with a clear view of everyone. The senior partner explained that the meeting would cover Elena's personal wishes and the current state of the main trust. His tone was calm and formal. He began with small things first. He read notes about personal items, jewelry, art pieces, small gifts to staff. People nodded and murmured. Leo looked relaxed, almost bored. Then the partner turned a page and spoke about a small personal gift from Elena to me. He read that she left me $15 from her own separate account, as a memory of the first allowance she once gave me when we had nothing. The room was quiet for a second. Leo smirked. Victor gave a small, knowing smile. To them, it sounded like confirmation of their view of me. I felt something move inside my chest, but I stayed still. I knew this was only one line in a much larger story. The partner cleared his throat and reached for another folder. His eyes moved over the first page, and I saw his expression change slightly. He glanced at Mira, then began to read. He explained that separate from Elena's personal items, the main fortune had been placed long ago into a living trust founded by Elena and me together. He stated that, with her gone, I now stood as sole trustee. Leo sat up straighter. Victor's smile faded a little. The partner went on. He read about the conduct and relationship clause in simple terms. He explained that the trustee had the duty to protect the values of the founders and could delay or limit an heir's access if there was clear, repeated disrespect or active attempts to push the founders out while they were still present. He said that, in recent weeks, the firm had received a notice from the trustee, that was me, along with records, board minutes, messages, and a video from a rooftop dinner where certain remarks were made about reducing my life's work to $15. Leo's face lost its color. Victor shifted in his chair and opened his mouth, but Mira raised a hand slightly and asked the partner to continue. The partner read the enforcement decision. He said that Leo remained a beneficiary, but his access to the main capital was now delayed for at least 10 years and would follow strict yearly limits. He explained that large parts of the fortune were now directed to long-term housing funds, community projects, and scholarships in Elena's name, under my supervision as trustee. He added that any future changes would again require my signature, not Leo's. Leo protested. He said this could not be right, that I was twisting things, that it was against Elena's wishes. The partner replied, in a quiet tone, that Elena had signed the trust terms many years before and that all procedures followed her signature and the law. He pointed to dates, to scans, to my role written clearly on the first page. Victor tried to argue, but his words had nowhere to go. The papers were already stamped and filed. The bank summaries, the minutes, the videos, and the notices sat in a thick bundle beside the recorder. I stood up slowly. I thanked the partner and Mira for their work. I did not look away from Leo when I said that the structures would stand and that I would carry out my role with care. Then I picked up the binder with my name on it, turned, and walked out of the room while the others sat in stunned silence behind me.